Welcome to week 8 of our videos, and we're looking today at leadership, motivation and performance. And if we start by looking at these 4 key functions of management, these are all things you're familiar with now because we've been discussing them quite a lot this semester. If you remember, we started off with planning when we're looking at what is our strategy, where do we want to get to. We then moved on to the organising, actually defining specific tasks and specific activities and actually operationalising the strategy. Now we're going to begin to look at leading, the motivating of staff, the encouraging of high performance. And in a couple of weeks' time we'll be looking at controlling, actually monitoring the progress against the targets. The professional magazine for the management organisation actually argue that 40% of line managers are ineffective. We've been discussing organisational culture, and culture, as you remember, affects the efficiency and the effectiveness of the organisation. And there are different cultures which suit different organisations of different types. And if you remember, we were thinking of culture as a sum of values and rituals. And there are quite a wide-ranging set of components in organisational culture, thinking about the rules, the particularities, the individuals or teams, the task or person, and the achievement or status. Then we've been looking at the design or the type of culture, and as you know, particularly looking at Charles Handy's organisational design or culture. And you remember that this is power culture, and we think of the spider's web, we think of role culture, the Greek temple representing bureaucracy, task representing the fishing net, and the person culture. And I think it's important to remember that no one culture is better than another. They just suit different types of tasks. If we very briefly just go back to look at the power and role culture. So the power culture, control radiates from the centre, the power is among the few, and there's few rules and little bureaucracy. But swift decisions are possible quite easily. When we looked at role culture, people very clearly had delegated authority, but there was a highly defined structure. There was a hierarchical bureaucracy. And power actually derives from the person's position. And there's little scope exists there for expert power. We then moved on to the task culture, and we've been discussing that tasks are formed to solve particular problems, often comes in from the teams, with our functional departments and project teams. And power derives from the expertise, as long as a team requires that expertise. There is no, or there should be, no single power source, and it's very much referred to as a matrix organisation. And teams may develop their own objectives, which could actually be a risk for the organisation. And then finally the person culture, where people believe themselves to be superior to the business. Often it's a business full of people with a similar background, training, expertise, and perhaps, if we think about things, professionals, accountants, lawyers, consultants, and the power lies in each group of individuals. So moving along from that now, what we're looking at today is leadership, and especially in conjunction with motivational theory. Now, there are lots of theories, and leadership is usually associated with behaviours rather than character traits. It's associated with things like how you act. It's very much situationally based, depending on the context. And it does work with the assumption that leadership is a skill that can be developed, and it's not actually a trait which you're born with. If we look at the definition here from Charles Handy, and Charles Handy defines a leader as someone who shapes and shares a vision, which gives point to the work of others. And next week we'll actually be looking in more detail at leadership versus management. If we look at some other definitions of motivation, And I've actually taken this from an assignment, and it does show ways of how definitions can be presented in assignments, definitions from different academic sources. So motivation has been described as the creation of stimuli, incentives and working environments that enable people to perform to the best of their ability in pursuit of the organisational success. And it's accepted that generally one person cannot motivate others, but what they can do is create conditions for others to self-motivate. Mitchell actually concurs with this and defines motivation as the degree to which an individual wants and chooses to engage in certain specified behaviour. And we just have the referencing here as you would reference it in the Harvard style in your report. So motivation, very much the L function, or the L factor. So what do we actually mean by this? Well, it's L as in planning, organising, leading and controlling. So motivation is linked to the L function we've been saying, and one of the purposes is the argument that more highly motivated staff tend to perform better. There's a much higher level of performance. But with motivation, there's very much the need for nurturing. Employees do need to be nurtured. And negative factors can vastly outweigh the positive ones. If we were looking more about motivation and what it actually is, well, I think it could be argued that motivation is concerned with the desire to do something or to achieve a particular report. And I think that motivated employees will result in greater productivity, better quality products or service, lower staff turnover, reduced absenteeism. And you see we have a picture here on motivation about carrots and sticks, and just wonder if you're actually aware of what this actually means. And the phrase carrots and sticks is actually something used to characterise by use both of reward and punishment to induce cooperation and influence behaviour.